to the next point.
Towards
We should ensure
us.
whatever we say is clear.
That means work is being done. We can see that it is in opposite direction. It is against.
Good day, students. You are once again welcome to another class of biology in the senior secondary school. We're going to conduct a class based on the topic plant nutrition. Plant nutrition is a subtopic under general nutrition. Previously, we have discussed the nutrition in animals. Now we want to look at nutrition in plants. Now, when we said plant nutrition, under plant nutrition, we're going to look at the introduction, we're going to look at the definition of nutrition, the modes of nutrition, photosynthesis, features of photosynthesis, stages of photosynthesis, materials or conditions necessary for photosynthesis, conclusion, then we round up with an assignment. Now, under this, when we said plant nutrition, we know that basically one of the major characteristics of all living organisms is their ability to feed. Is their what? Ability to feed. That is why in the elementary biology, when we are mentioning the characteristics of living organisms, we said all living organisms must feed, and that is what we call nutrition. Now, because of this fact, plants need to feed so as to survive. Now, that takes us to what is nutrition. When we say nutrition, we are simply referring to a process by which these plants, because we are talking about plant nutrition, manufacture their own food, or living organisms obtain their food substances for their growth, for their development, for their reproduction, and for their survival. That is the major essence of nutrition. That is why plants need to feed, because they need to develop, they need to reproduce, and they need to survive. So without nutrition, all these aspects will not be possible. So that is why plants need to take in the process of nutrition. Now, this nutrition we are talking about, it has two types, or we can call it two modes of nutrition. Basically, we have two modes of this nutrition. When we say mode, it means ways by which living organisms could feed. And generally, we have two major modes of nutrition. The first one we said is called autotrophic mode of nutrition, and the second one we said is called heterotrophic mode of nutrition. When we said autotrophic mode of nutrition, this is a type of nutrition by which green plants are able to manufacture their own food. What does that mean? It means that there are plants that has the ability of producing their own food by themselves. And if plant has that characteristics, they are said to be called autotrophs. And this type of nutrition, we call it autotrophic mode of nutrition. The other mode of nutrition is called heterotrophic mode of nutrition. In this type of nutrition, it is that type of nutrition that living organisms cannot manufacture their own food, but rather they depend directly or indirectly on plants, meaning that plant has to produce the food, then those living organisms will now consume that food. And when that type of nutrition takes place, it is said to be called heterotrophic mode of nutrition. And those living organisms that carries out this second mode of nutrition, they are called heterotrophs. Now, in this class, we are majorly concerned about the autotrophic mode of nutrition, because in our previous class, we have seen animal nutrition where we dealt with heterotrophic nutrition. Now, let's look at the autotrophic mode of nutrition. This takes us to what is known as photosynthesis. When we said photosynthesis, some of you will begin to wonder, we said plants are able to feed. And you know that plant doesn't have mouth, neither they have hands. But how do they feed? There is a special mechanism of natural phenomenon by which these plants are able to carry out this process of feeding. And that mechanism is what we call photosynthesis. Photosynthesis, when we said photosynthesis, we are simply meaning that it's a process in which green plants are able to manufacture their own food in the presence of sunlight and chlorophyll using carbon dioxide and water. What does that mean? It means that these green plants we are seeing, they are utilizing carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, they are utilizing water from the soil, and they are utilizing sunlight from the sun. And also chlorophyll, which is a green pigment that is found in the chloroplast of plants. When we said it is found in the chloroplast of plant, we know that all living organisms are made up of cells. So plants also have cells. And in cell, there are organelles, and these organelles, they are the smaller units that make up a cell. So one of these units is called the chloroplast, and that is the site, or that is the location or position where this photosynthesis takes place. And that is where we have the chlorophyll. And we said chlorophyll is a green pigment that gives plants their greenish color. That is why we see plants looking greenish. It is because of the presence of this pigment called chlorophyll. Now, this same photosynthesis we have just seen, we said it's a process. The plant requires carbon dioxide, plant requires water, they require sunlight, they require chlorophyll for them to be able to manufacture their own food. And when that takes place, we call that process photosynthesis. From the name, photo meaning from light, synthesis meaning to manufacture or to produce. So when we said photosynthesis, meaning a process by which something is being produced using light, that is what it means in a short while. Now, this photosynthesis, we can represent it using this chemical equation. When we say chemical equation, we are referring to equation like this. Some of you that offers chemistry, they will understand what I am saying. Now, you can see from the equation, from the left-hand side, we have the reactants. From the right-hand side, we have the products. Now, when the reactants when the reactant reacts, they produce the product, and that is how this food is being produced in plant. Now, we can see the carbon dioxide. When carbon dioxide reacts with water in the presence of sunlight and chlorophyll, it produces a starch known as a glucose, and it also liberates oxygen as waste product. Now, you can see that some of you will wonder, you know that the chemical formula of carbon dioxide is usually CO2, but now you are seeing 6CO2. Now, that 6 is to ensure that whatever is on the left-hand side is equal to what is on the right-hand side. That is the concept of balancing of chemical equation. For every chemical equation, if a reaction takes place and you have the product, the equation has to be balanced. The number of compounds, the number of elements you have on the left-hand side must be equal to the number of elements you have on the right-hand side. So on the left-hand side, we have 6 molecules of carbon dioxide, we have 6 molecules of water, now in the presence of sunlight and chlorophyll. Now on the right-hand side, which is the product side, we have a molecule of glucose, and it is represented with this chemical formula C6H12O6. That is the chemical formula of glucose, and that is the form of food that is being produced by plants when they undergo photosynthesis. And lastly, you have 6 molecules of oxygen, and oxygen is produced as byproduct or as waste product. So in a nutshell, if you are asked to define photosynthesis, if you are able to write this simple chemical equation, you have clearly defined what photosynthesis is. All you need to do is that you just define the various terms. The first one we say is carbon dioxide. The second one is water. On the product side, we said we have glucose, and the last one is what we call oxygen. So this is a simple illustration of how photosynthesis takes place. Now, this photosynthesis has certain features. It has certain characteristics. These features, they include photosynthesis takes place in the chloroplast of plant cells in the presence of sunlight. As I have explained earlier on, we said it takes place in the chloroplast of plant cell. And I told you the chloroplast is a cellular organelle where chlorophyll are located, and that is the site by which photosynthesis takes place. The next feature, we said the raw materials for the process are simple inorganic compounds such as carbon dioxide and water. They are the raw materials, meaning that these are the compounds that are required to produce food for plants, and they include carbon dioxide and water. The last feature, we said the final product of the process are glucose and water. As you can see in our previous equation, we said the final products are glucose and water. But that glucose is the most useful aspect of the equation or of the reaction, because the water is removed as waste product. Now, having looked at the features of this photosynthesis, before this photosynthesis takes place, it proceeds in stages. When we say stages, we mean it proceeds in some steps. And the two major stages in photosynthesis, they are the light reaction and the dark reaction. What that simply means is that this whole process of photosynthesis, of manufacturing foods by plants, by themselves, takes place in two distinct stages. It takes place during the light or during the daytime, and it also takes place during the night, that is at night. So these are the two different stages. Now, the light reaction is called the light stage, as well as the dark reaction, we can also call it the dark stage. Now, what happens in this light reaction, it means that during the day, when there is bright sunlight, there is a process called photolysis of water. That is one of the major stages that takes place during the light reaction. And when we said photolysis of water, we are referring to the breaking down of water using solar radiation. Photo, as I said earlier, is from light. Then lysis or lysis meaning to split or to break something into smaller units. So now water as a molecule needs to be broken into hydrogen ion and hydroxyl ion. And that process is being accomplished during the daytime. And the whole process is called photolysis of water. Now, during the night or at night, when we call it dark reaction, what happens is that is where the manufacture or the production of stored glucose is being converted into simple glucose. What we mean is that at night, a starch is being produced during the process. Now, that starch, it cannot be utilized by plant because it's a complex starch. So that starch has to be converted into a simpler form that can be utilized by those plants. And that form is what we call the glucose, which is a much more simpler form of starch. And that process takes place during the dark or at night. So these are the two major stages that are involved in photosynthesis. The first stage we said is the light reaction, where photolysis of water takes place. The second stage we call it the dark reaction, and that is the stage that takes place at night and where the conversion of complex starch takes place into a simple glucose molecule for easy absorption and assimilation by these plants. Now, before this photosynthesis takes place, certain materials or certain conditions must be available. It's just like if you want to cook food at home. There are things that you have to make them available before you are able to cook that food. You need to bring a stove, you need to get water, you need to bring the food substances and other things. Now, so also this photosynthesis, before it proceeds, there are some materials and certain factors that are necessary for the process to be possible. Now, one of these factors, they include carbon dioxide, chlorophyll, sunlight, suitable temperature, and enzymes. So all these 5 factors or materials need to be present for photosynthesis to be effective. Carbon dioxide. Why do you need carbon dioxide for photosynthesis? How do plants obtain this carbon dioxide? We all know that carbon dioxide is found in the atmosphere. When we say in the atmosphere, that is the portion of Earth that is covered by air, where you have oxygen, where you have nitrogen gas, oxygen gas, carbon dioxide, and other inert gases. So carbon dioxide is usually found in the atmosphere, and it has the ability of getting into the plants through a structure called stomata. When we say stomata, it's a small opening that is found at the surface of leaves. Anywhere you see a leaf of plant, the plant is able to take in those carbon dioxide from the atmosphere through the leaves and through a particular smaller opening called the stomata. It's a microscopic structure that we may not be able to see them with our naked eyes. Now, the stomata in plant is similar to the nose in humans. Now, if you need to take in oxygen in humans, we have the nose, and that is the point where we take in oxygen, and that is the point where we bring out carbon dioxide. So the same thing in plants. When plants need to take in carbon dioxide, they take it through the stomata, which I said is a small opening that is found at the leaves, and that is where gaseous exchange takes place. That is movement in of carbon dioxide and movement out of oxygen. The next is the chlorophyll. What is this chlorophyll? It's a green pigment that gives plants its greenish color. You see plants looking green because of the presence of this pigment called chlorophyll, and it also aids photosynthesis. You have the sunlight. How do you get the sunlight? It's from the solar energy, from the sun. There is usually solar radiation. Now, this radiation is being trapped by plants, and it helps in so many processes. It provides a suitable temperature for photosynthesis. It also helps in photolysis, as we have mentioned in our earlier explanation, where the splitting of water into hydrogen ion and hydroxyl ion takes place. It is with the help of the sunlight. We also have a suitable temperature. If you want to cook in your rice at home, you cannot just bring your rice, put it inside a pot and pour in water, and you leave it and you expect that rice to be cooked. It is practically impossible. You need to apply a suitable temperature, either by putting a stove, by applying heat, or any other heat source. And that is what makes that food to boil. So that is what we call a suitable temperature. So in the case of photosynthesis, before it proceeds, there is a need for also a suitable temperature. And that temperature is also derived from the sunlight. The solar radiation provides that temperature which is suitable or optimum. And there are some mechanisms that takes place within the plants, some anabolic processes or catabolic processes that involve the generation of heat. And usually it is when you have catabolism, when plants are able to break down complex compounds into smaller ones. But in the case of photosynthesis, because it involves building of simpler compounds to produce a complex one. So we call that as what? Anabolism. So in that process, heat is also generated. So that heat from that reaction, accompanied with heat from the sun, also helps to provide optimum temperature. We also have enzymes. And we all know that enzymes are organic catalysts that help to speed up the rate at which equation or chemical reactions takes place. Now, for this photosynthesis to take place in a time, within the shortest possible time, they need the presence of enzymes. Now, these enzymes helps to proceed or accelerate the rate at which the photosynthesis takes place. So these are the materials and conditions that must be available for photosynthesis to take place. Now, having looked at all this, we have to conclude by saying that plants need to feed because they are living organisms. And in as much as they need to feed, but they don't have hands, they don't have mouth, they have to devise a means by which they can produce their own food, and that process by which they are able to produce or manufacture their own food is what we call photosynthesis. And that is what makes plants to be called autotrophic living organisms, or they are called autotrophs, meaning that they have the ability of producing food by themselves when certain conditions are available. And those conditions we have just mentioned, we said the carbon dioxide, water, sunlight, chlorophyll, suitable temperature, and enzymes. So when these are present, now plant has the ability to carry out this process of photosynthesis. On this note, I think we have come to the end of today's class. Now, when you look at it, in summary, we have to understand the fact that plants, being living organisms, they have to feed, whether we like it or not, because that is a major characteristic of plant. Now, because they have to feed, they devise a means of feeding, and that means it's what we call photosynthesis. And when we say photosynthesis, we said it's a process by which green plants manufacture their own food themselves using carbon dioxide, using water, using sunlight, and chlorophyll to produce their own food. And when plants are able to carry out that process, we said they are called autotrophs. Now, this process of photosynthesis, we said you can define photosynthesis using a simple chemical reaction. When you have that chemical reaction and you may ensure that it is well balanced, meaning that what you have on the left-hand side is equivalent to what you have on the right-hand side, for your equation to be balanced, you have clearly defined what photosynthesis is all about. Now, before we call it a day, I would like to give you an assignment. And this assignment is very important. As you can see, I have two questions. Question number 1, we said 1A, define the term nutrition. Define the term nutrition. Question 1B says, mention 2 modes of nutrition. Mention 2 modes of nutrition. Question 2A, using chemical equation, describe the process of photosynthesis. Question 2A, using chemical equation, describe the process of photosynthesis. Question 2B, briefly explain the stages for photosynthesis. Question 2B again, briefly explain the stages for photosynthesis. Now, these questions are very important. I would like all of you to try and solve these questions. And once you are able to do that, you can send in your answers through my contact. You can contact me using the phone number 080-33-35-6076. The number again, 080-33-35-6076. I remain Musa Shehu, your biology teacher. I am expecting your response. Stay safe, keep learning. COVID-19 is real.